that are present this evening. Welcome for our special meeting of council to distill our budget for consideration. We have probably a fairly long meeting in terms of the amount of decisions that probably in front of us tonight. But I'll open the meeting by acknowledging the Ngadjuri and the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians of the land and the waters of the Light Regional Council area. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to the other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. It's the oldest living culture on earth. We should be very proud. Attendance, do we have any apologies? I believe we have one from Councillor Michael. Is that correct? Thank you. Any other apologies? No. We do have an application for a leave. I sent a note around to all our council members in relation to this. It was a difficult decision for me to make, but one I believe I need to do. I think I've got a few things going around in my head that shouldn't be there. And also I've got some other health issues as well, which I really want to have some time to try and overcome. Also, I have an appointment with my son in London to go and say g'day as well, and his family. So I'm looking forward to that in lots of respects. Certainly, if my leave's approved, the council will be in the capable hands of Councillor Simon to take the role as acting mayor, and I don't have any issues with that at all. I think to see someone new in the seat here too might be a bit refreshing for council members also, and some staff as well, to see how things can be done in a slightly different way. But I do, thank everybody for the support they've provided me over a long period of time, and I don't always get it right, but I think my heart's in the right place, and I've enjoyed sort of this position, and hopefully I'll be able to come back to the position also when my leave is concluded. But there is a recommendation there that leave of absence from myself for the period of 30th of June to the 12th of September inclusive. Thank you, Councillor Dean. Thanks, Councillor Lynn. Any comments, councillors, or anything? No? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thanks, councillors, and I trust you will understand my reasoning behind all that as I bumbled through it, but it wasn't an easy thing for me to say. Tonight, as we're aware, we're looking at our budget through another lens. We met at Hewitt in our last meeting, and I think it was a very productive meeting in lots of ways. We didn't ultimately come to an outcome, but I think we learned a lot from what was put forward on the night, and we had a good opportunity since then to have a look at our budget and etc. Tonight we're going to open our meeting with a presentation of the annual business plan and budget and the long-term financial plan from Dr. Nigel Graves, our General Manager of Business and Finance, and he will go through the budget as he sees it, and I will ask that we hold our questions till Nigel's finished his presentation, but believe me, you'll have every opportunity to ask questions at the conclusion of the presentation. So thank you, Nigel, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, Mayor Bill. I'm hoping you'll bear with me a little bit tonight because we've received a number of inputs, and I think it's probably important that not just responding to the direct requests and inputs that we received, but also discussing some of the issues that they actually raise. So put it into context. In other words, I'll mainly be speaking, but towards the end, the acting CEO will also have some input. as well, Mayor Bill. So we're hoping the ultimate outcome is to get to a position where we can proceed to public consultation. Just a bit of an overview. I think it's important that I talk about financial sustainability, particularly in terms of the mandatory key performance indicators that you're required to review. As I've spoken about before, one of the risks to the original long-term financial plan draft and the budget process, annual business plan, has been that unlike the last couple of years, we've been going through an enterprise agreement negotiations. It's still to be finalised. So an update financially where that's at and what risks that poses for the original numbers that you've seen. It's also important I talk about some of the price and cost indexes that we refer to in making our recommendations to you about the budget structure. I will talk briefly about the rate revenue policy and how that impacts upon some of the suggestions that have been made. Councillor Michael did raise a potential variation to considering a different differential rate for commercial. So I'll talk about what the impact of that would be. He also spoke about a reduction in annual expenditure. I'm assuming he meant operating expenditure because we've already approved the asset management plan. So that's built into the long-term financial plan of 500,000. I'll talk about the implications of that. Deputy Mayor talked about a revenue reduction of overall 2%, so I'll talk about that. There were questions about consulting fees, legal, work health, safety, contractors and cleaning, which was referred to us by the Deputy Mayor. We'll refer to that. Some of those things, particularly the next one as well, software license fees, I'll refer to that. Some of those contain an enormous amount of detail. We don't necessarily expect that you're going to be able to digest that detail in a meeting like this, but it's fair enough to say that our current view is that all of those things are essential, committed to. So it's really outlining the detail behind that, so you can review those leading up to the approval of the budget process in detail and hopefully agree with us. I'll briefly talk about the hardware refresh and the implications of that. Also, Mayor Bill, Pepper's come along to talk about the library literacy program to help me out there. We'll also briefly refer to the economic development program, and Kyron will help me out there. And there's also questions about the amount of consulting, legal and cleaning. I've already mentioned cleaning. And there was a request for various other reports that Councillor Michael referred to in his requests. I think I've already dealt with the purpose of the meeting. Just a reminder that before that public consultation can occur, we need to go through a legal advice and community process. So that takes a few days, and then there's another 21-day consultation period for the community to express their views. I feel like after some of the things that were said at the last meeting in particular that I need to say something about the rate revenue policy. When I first arrived here, I was advised that we didn't have a rate revenue policy. We had some long-standing practices, but one of the first things I was asked to do was to assist the council in preparing a rate revenue policy. One of the things that was decided in that year in particular that we would not be doing a rate revenue policy development during the hurly-burly of a rate setting process or a budget process. That would be best considered in detail outside of the politics of those processes, and that's what we did. We went through a extensive program of 3 special workshops and progressively worked through all the legislation and all the options. We had the University of South Australia prepare some very detailed analysis for us, both on the impacts of various options under the legislation and the people's ability to pay in this region. That was followed by the council endorsing the rate revenue policy. There was a couple of fairly critical decisions that they made out of that, and that council specifically decided not to go down the fixed charge route. It was deemed to be inequitable and it had some impact on, I suppose, lower income people in our community. I mention that particularly because in doing some comparisons in a minute, I'll be referring to other councils. So 3 of the ones that Councillor Michael referred to, adjacent councils, use the fixed charge, and so you need to take that in consideration. The other fairly important aspect of those deliberations was confirming the differential rating structure and its relationship to the residential rate being considered the primary rate. So everything that's before you at the moment is continuing the policy that was developed in that year. This particular council also had a briefing on that policy when you came in, when you were elected again, and confirmed that policy. So as that now, that's the official policy, and therefore that's the way the budget's structured to work within those requirements. The other thing with that rate revenue policy, changes to that require to be consulted with the community, which was undertaken when it was first adopted. There was a question at the last meeting about how late can we actually approve a budget. So I put up the extract from the Local Government Act, and the key words I've highlighted: must be adopted. You can't do it before the 31st of May, and you must do it before the ensuing financial year, which means before the year that it refers to. That's just good. That's just good management practice to have a budget in place before you actually start spending the money or trying to raise the money. And also, not doing it earlier causes us challenges in terms of getting rates, etc., prepared. There is an exception, and the exception is in the case of extraordinary administrative difficulty. So if you've got extraordinary administrative difficulty, then effectively you've got until the 15th of August. And it'd be very difficult for us to argue that we've got administrative difficulties in the current climate. We've been working on this process since early January. And there's been many meetings on the process. What would be administrative difficulty would be, well, imagine if the building burnt down or the computer system blew up or something or other, that probably would be administrative, but I doubt whether considerations of a council would be considered an administrative difficulty. So that said, financial sustainability, I think, is important just to recap on. When we talk about it, we're talking about not just the budget year, we're talking about the long-term financial position. So a 10-year plan probably should be considered over longer than that, but that's the minimum that we're required to do. At least we could have a longer plan. Whether things are sustainable, there are 3 key measures mandatory under the legislation that you must consider, which is the operating result, surplus or deficit, and the requirement that you put on yourselves is that it should be between 0% and 5%. That's our target. Another key one is the proportion of the most recently reviewed asset management plan preferably that should be 100%, and that's the way the long-term financial plan is currently structured, and you've endorsed the asset management plan for that process. And then there's the net financial liability, which basically is a measure of your indebtedness. So that you have broad range there, but effectively you can't be more than 100%, and you shouldn't be less than 0%. So effectively less than 0% would mean you'd have a whole lot of ratepayers' money sloshing around invested that you're not using, and over 100% you're probably borrowing far too much. Another key important one though is, and this is in your policy, rate revenue volatility. So significant variations from year to year in increases in your rates, and that is important because if you were to have a low rate this year and a high rate next year, ratepayers don't appreciate those particular changes. And the other aspect of it is intergenerational equity. So effectively don't leave the future generations to have to pay for what you're using today. But it's also important in terms of ratepayers coming and going. So it's probably reasonable that the ratepayers of today make a reasonable contribution to the services that they're using. In terms of price and cost indexes, it's important to understand why we refer to them. We do refer to a consumer price index, which is a basket of consumer goods. The consumer price index has no relevance whatsoever to the cost of our operations. It's just that the community uses it generally, especially the media, as some sort of measure against which to compare the prices that we use and increase. As I said, it has no relevance whatsoever to our cost structure. What measures our cost structure is the local government price index. The local government price index is many years ago taken over by the university to do the measure. And that is a weighted measure of the cost of goods and services. They're the ones that are putting pressure on us to balance the budget every year. And there's many variations of these measures. You've got to be careful that you're looking at the annual one or the quarterly one or the monthly one. You understand what the implications are. When you're looking at monthly consumer price index, it can be quite volatile, depending on what's happening at the time. And then in the last recent couple of years, exceptionally so because what's happening elsewhere in the world. The other thing to be wary of is revisions. So what might be published at 5% or something today, invariably the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, next month say, oh, look, we discovered that things didn't quite work out the way that we're going to work out, and they give you a different number. And there's also historic, which is what the Bureau of Statistics look at, and also forecast, which invariably we use from the Reserve Bank. There's invariably delays in compiling data, so many weeks before these things are issued, up to the period that they're referring to, so that can be a bit problematical. We always refer to the Adelaide CPI and all of our contractual arrangements. That's usually the appropriate measure because it's the costs that we're effectively experience within the state, and it's what our ratepayers would be referring to. So it was up until March 2024, it was 4.3%. The most recently available local government price index was 7.9%. So that's the real measure of what local government is experiencing in cost increases. And you'll probably read in the media that there's many other councils looking at quite significant rate revenue increases, well above the sorts of numbers that we were talking about here. So there's a fair bit of pressure on being caused because of the local government costs. When I provide you with this presentation, there'll be a link to the local government price index if anybody wants to investigate how that's structured. I won't go through this text, but this is the sort of explanation you get in terms of what the LGPI is. In some of the publicity in the general media in recent times, it's saying that the CPI has been 3.5% up to 12 months to March, but as note that that's for the entire Australian economy, not Adelaide. So that's not, that wouldn't be a benchmark we'd normally use. But this is the next line shows you the how relevant it is for local government operations. So what's the most significant price increases in the 3.5%? Housing, minimal impact on our operations. Food and non-alcoholic beverages, occasionally we might have a bit of that. Transport, 4.5%. That does have a significant impact on us, but alcohol and tobacco obviously doesn't have much relevance. So I think it shows that the CPI itself is only a measure by the community. It has very little relevance to our operations. There's a slide there as well about what the highest and lowest were in the last 12 months up until March, and Adelaide won the race there. There's also been significant impacts on insurances in that year as well, and that's also affecting us. The lowest happened to be Hobart and last one. I believe they've had a little bit of decline in rents in that part of the world after some extreme pressure over the last couple of years. So in terms of, well, I was giving you all the spiel about financial sustainability. I'm only going to talk about the surplus situation tonight because that's probably been the main focus of the last meeting. And the graph you have before you there is the current position of the long-term financial plan over the next 10 years. The long-term financial plan barely has a small surplus in 24-25, and that's even excluding what we now know with changes in the enterprise agreement negotiations. So that will be putting further pressure on that. It looks impressive with a scale on the left-hand side up to a maximum of 4.5%, but effectively that's there because the range that your policy says is between 0 and 5%. So out over the 10 years, you can see that you're within the band as the draft long-term financial plan sits. But things change a little bit with the discussion last meeting about a 3.5% rate increase, and I'm only talking about that component of our rate revenue that excludes growth. So we're talking about a 3.5% rate increase instead of a 4.5%. The compounding effect of that is quite significant over the 10 years. So each year progressively gets a little bit worse if that continues, and clearly shows that the long-term financial plan in that scenario would be not sustainable. Yeah, I'm sure there are those who will say that, well, let's balance it up with reductions in expenditure, and I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute. So just a reminder of what the effect of the suggestions are in terms of some of the things that have come from members. One of the ones I wanted to talk about was that there was a suggestion made at the last meeting that there's a table in the annual business plan that talks about all of the land use codes, and then it's got an average rate increase per land use code. And I think a few members commented on the significant variation in the increases in the rates, and the suggestion was made, let's make them all the same increase. There's some serious problems with that. First of all, it's not compliant with Local Government Act that says that rating is a tax on valuation. By having an average increase across all land use codes, you're effectively washing out the entire impact of valuation. So that would not be compliant with the legislation. The other important part that, especially in a council like this, is that if you look at two of those land use codes, top one says residential, and towards the bottom you've got vacant land. In those categories, you've got a significant amount of growth of new properties. So in the vacant land, you've got additional land being subdivided. In the residential, you've got new houses being built and completed. That's real growth in rates. If you were to make every category the same average, arithmetically, what you're doing is you're spreading the entire amount of the real growth and putting it to the benefit of all other ratepayers and averaging out. It means you're not getting any additional revenue then from growth places like Roseworthy. So you're not getting any additional revenue to spend on the additional services that you're going to have to provide. This budget has got a relatively small amount, a couple $100,000 or so, which is for starting to do service delivery like grass cutting, etc., in the first subdivisions that are going to be handed over, and other minor maintenance, no doubt. That particular approach would be a serious threat to the financial sustainability of this council. If you started that and approached that year after year, eventually you'd find yourself with a very serious deficit. As I said on the Local Government Act, that's the actual wordings. Rates constitute a system of taxation. It does refer to generally based on the value of land. The reason it refers to generally based on the value of land is there's a couple of levers that you've got. One is the minimum rate of the fixed charge, so that goes a little bit away from the valuation of land concept, and that's really about everybody making some contribution. The other variation regarding generally based on the value of land is you can do certain service charges. There's 3 of them under the Act. And there's also the Act says that the minister can prescribe others. Well, that wording's been in there for a long, long time, and there's not that many that have been prescribed. One of them is refuse collection, another one CWS, both of which you use. And the third one is television towers. So there are some councils in the state that in the past, and I used to work at one, we had a television tower because the television signals for the local community was terrible, so that's what we invested in. But there's no other service charges. So effectively the main impact of that legislation is we do rates based on valuation, which is a tax. In terms of differential rating, I've just repeated the revenue policy, and the main thing to focus on there, like many other councils, your basis of differentiation is your residential rate. So it's expressed as a percentage of your residential rate. There's nothing in there that says that it's going to be 1 for everything. Otherwise, there's no point having a differentiation. You may as well just adopt a standard rate for everything. It's supposed to take into account historical and current levels of differentiation of services, and also in particular the utilisation and cost of infrastructure assets, particularly outside the townships. One of the suggestions made One of the suggestions made was that we should be reducing or considering reduced commercial rates relative to adjacent councils. I didn't just want to show you the individual commercial rates, and you're getting this as a handout because I don't expect you to be able to read what's on the slide for this. I've included the residential and industrial. I suspect the intent was actually to talk about industry as well, because from time to time we do hear things about the rating there being quite high, and also primary deduction, which is effectively a version of primary production. What I wanted to illustrate to you is the relativities to those adjacent councils. The first question I ask myself when someone says compare to adjacent councils, well, if they're all the same, that would be easy, but they're not. They're all over the place. Everybody has a different approach to this stuff. The way I've constructed this, if you work from the left-hand side, we have the description of the type of rate. I'm then using the rate in $1 for this year. We wouldn't have anything to compare with because we don't know what everyone else's is going to be for next year, even though we have a bit of an idea, I suppose, where we're headed. I've then got what we have as our current valuation. We know the number of assessments. I can then work out what the average valuation is for each one of the properties in each one of the differential categories, land use categories. I then calculate, and this is the slightly shaded green with the blue numbers for light region. I then calculate what the rates would be here for each one of the land use codes. So residential, the average value this year would be rates payable of $2,045 for the year. Next to that column, you've got the ratios that we're using under the policy, under revenue policy, and then I'm doing the same sort of calculations for our adjacent councils, for Adelaide Plains, Barossa, Clare, Gilbert Valleys, Gawler, and Playford. So what you'll see in the left-hand column under each one of those councils will be their rate in $1 for this year, and then I've calculated what our average valuation would be in their council. So if you had a house worth $511,000 odd here, and you bought a house for $511,000 Adelaide Plains is going to cost you $2,139 in rates this year. So I've done the same exercise for all of those adjacent councils. The red indicates where those councils are more expensive than here, and the blue would indicate that they're less than light regional. I should also explain that the two lines above that is the minimum rate and the fixed charge. So you can see that Adelaide Plains, Barossa, and Playford all have a fixed charge, and Playford in particular has a very hefty fixed charge. Now, those members who were around when we did the analysis for the rating policy would probably remember that the conclusion was with a very high fixed charge is seriously penalising the lower income people of your community. So it's interesting that Playford used the maximum possible fixed charge, which is 50% of your ratepayers. And it seems to be quite extreme, but that's up to them. What I've tried, and I should also say that even in doing that, they have a slightly cheaper average residential rate, 1,995 compared to light regional. While I'm talking about Playford, I might as well say, but run your eye down after that. So now you're going down the list. They might have a slightly lower residential, but gee, they got some very, very high commercial and industrial rates. So I assume that's where they make up for it. I assume they don't probably have a lot of primary production, but they do have a rate in the dollar for it. So then I've done some charts just so you can see the comparisons. And I hope you agree after looking at these charts that it's a very difficult thing to come to a conclusion as to what would be a comparable adjacent rate council that would be relevant to light regional. So the first chart there is a residential one. So I've done the green is light, and then the brownie coloured bar chart is the adjacent council that's the most expensive on that land use category. So with residential, Barossa sticks out there. So the reason that would be because they got a $420 fixed charge before you start, and yet their rate in the dollar is also quite high this year. Commercial shop, you can see light regional is a little more than a number of the other councils, certainly not with Gawler and certainly not with Playford. So you can click over to the back and you've got the similar ones for commercial industry, light industry, other and primary production. So I hope you appreciate probably the main message there is that this is a complex topic going into
community level. And I guess one of the things that we do with our programs as well is we actually have the privilege to have that direct interaction with the community. So I know community engagement is a big thing for this council, and I agree, so it should be. I think Simon, you've spoken on it many times. And I guess that's one area that the libraries and even community development have the advantage with is we get to speak to families, we get to speak to single parents, we get to speak to the 4-year-old child coming in as well, and we get to hear what they're needing. We also know that council can't solve it all either, and it's not up to council to try and fix all this either. So we're also working in partnership with other organisations so we can help these figures, but also know that we can't do it all alone. So the picture that you can see here, this was actually from one of our family free days that we put on, thanks to the grant funding that we got. It was from the state government via a local government early childhood community innovation grant back in 2022, 2023, and that was directly aimed at trying to put programs in place or build long-lasting connections that then can help try and either slow down the vulnerability or put things in to help those families. And so then council, use that funding to be able to put these programs on the staff time to be able to do that, but also at the same time connected with families. You may or may not recall some that were on council in those probably 2022. We had Lutheran Community or Lutheran Care and their Community Connections team come across and be present at there. We had United Care Under being present. We had a steering committee with involvement of some of those groups, but also the local kindergarten, the local primary school, and looking at how we can actually help these children, these families, and those sorts of things. The other thing, I guess, where the library programs come into it is we see that parents and caregivers are their children's first teachers. So as they're growing up with their babies, with their toddlers, and we're looking at this going, sometimes we assume that parents know how to parent or they've had that privilege growing up, but we're also seeing generational issues coming through we think, oh, why don't parents know better? Why don't caregivers know better? Probably because they actually didn't have a good foundation either. So now we're starting to see that effect of people that have been here in the community long term. They haven't just necessarily moved in. Sometimes we can go, oh, well, they're just moving in from other areas. We're getting a bit of that, but we've also got, I guess, what I would call homegrown concerns and vulnerabilities in there as well. So we see, parents as the first teachers, and those literacy programs don't just promote, reading and writing or listening and those sorts of things, but it also models to the parents, and they can learn, well, how can you read the book? And, not just reading the words, but you might be pointing out some of the pictures in there of, oh, look, this, this one is jumping or this sheep is swimming, and it's also getting their speech happening too for those who are a little bit older. For babies, a great way for them to be learning is through the singing and rhyme time. I did tell Nigel I was happy to do some singing and stories. Not sure if he was so keen, but it's through those sorts of programs that we get to connect with the parents. We also get to see the children come in. So those families, we do have at-risk families in our communities. So those families, we get to see those children coming in, and we've got families that come in on the daily, and they'll spend a couple of hours in there. They'll come in specifically for our program, so that's kind of that carrot that enables to get them in there. But then they're spending time in there. They're seeing how we're interacting with them and interacting with their children. We're seeing them take home packs that we've created of stories and activities that then they go on to use to develop their fine motor skills. Their gross motor skills, which leads into each of these areas as well, the physical health and well-being, the social contents of those children being able to interact. One of those, where children don't go to childcare or parents don't work and they can't afford to send them to childcare or can't qualify for that, it's a great way for the children to interact with each other. It's a great way for the parents to connect. We've seen parents you know, talking about playgroups and other services that are around the area that maybe these families wouldn't have otherwise heard about. We've got a children and youth officer who was, you know, helps out with in planning these sorts of programs, going for grant funding as well. And because we're so high up, I guess, on the needs side there, that we do have that backing behind us as well. So it's having those programs in there. I guess the good thing with these programs too is we go outreach. So we don't just have them in a physical library branches, because we know that doesn't cover the whole region. So we, and now that we've got a position in there again, we're going back out to Hewitt, and we've been getting some great turnouts there at the Hewitt Centre, and we've also been taking library materials out for them as well. So they get the singing, they get the rhyme time, they get that connection, they get that access to the literacy materials as well. We're going to Wesley's, we go to Freeling, great at Freeling when we've had up to, I guess, easily 20 people at a Wiggle and Giggle session there. The mums come in with the bus, they connect, and then you see, I don't know, whether, you know, you've been in the Freeling Main Street sometimes on a Tuesday morning around 10:30, and you'll see Grand Patrol go down the street, and they'll go down to Am's Cookie Jar, they'll have their coffees, they'll keep connecting and have that conversation in there. So I guess it's that way that we're enabling people to connect. We're partnering with state government, the Worth Grow Minds campaign that's out at the moment, which is encouraging parents to read, sing, talk and play with their babies. That's, you know, seeing that on radio or hearing that on radio, seeing that on TV, because it's trying to promote to parents again that there are things that they can do to help the development that doesn't take, you know, a lot of money. And I guess a lot that we're seeing coming in and using our services are those that don't have the money. They're in those multiple categories. They, it's some of the people that we see come in. It's great to see them, because if we stop seeing some of these children, we do wonder whether they fall off the radar and what sort of risk factors are in there as well. So yeah, it's about what we can do as council to provide services. Our Wiggle and Giggle program, for example, when we run that, you know, an hour a week, 50 weeks a year, comes to about $1,800 and that's serving to a community. I mean, $1,800 in a library budget, we go, that's, you know, massive, but in the scheme of what council's providing, and I guess what our communities are needing, is that going to make a big difference to take some of the way? If anyone wants any other costings, you know, we're around that sort of 1,800 mark for a program. Some are, you know, 2,500 for the year-long program, and that's going out to the likes of Hewitt, Wesley's, Rosewood will be going out with their intergenerational programs as well. So, and I'm having started on the digital literacy side of things as well, and I won't go in there, but yeah, seeing quite a need there.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That's frightening news. Something we've got to pay attention to. Our children are our future. We know that. I think the services that have been provided, the library over a considerable period now, they have been doing a lot of heavy lifting, and I think that the situation will be far worse if we can have our library there and providing services that will capable of staff to provide. And it's something we should not forget. So thank you for that and reminding us.
And I think just one last thing that, you know, when we look at these vulnerabilities, it's about whether or not children can interact with others, whether they're respectful of other people's property, whether they engage with adults respectfully and those sorts of things. So if we don't do something about it now, we're probably going to have to pay for it in some other way, whether it's through vandalism, whether it's increased security, whether it's other intervention programs that come in. So it's do we work in that prevention space, or are we going to have to be paying out in that responsive space after the damage is done? So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Bev. It's something that we can't.
Thanks, Bev. Yeah, I'd probably wheel out a number of managers, not quite as passionate as Bev, but still pretty passionate when you start talking about reducing their budgets. They'll come and tell you why it's so important to them, whether it be clearing the streets or all sorts of different aspects, as well as even from a corporate sense. We have a very new, passionate information services IT manager. Sort of aghast when people start saying, well, can you cut that? So I'm going to talk about that a little bit now. Councillor Michael suggested we target a reduction in expenditure of 500,000. What I'm talking about now is why that's too high. As I've already outlined, we're already looking at least 113,000 more of a shortfall in the long-term financial plan, which we will have to manage. It could be as bad as 210. Long-term plan also has currently in their cost statement still to be achieved, but we would work upon a draft budget until we finally put something to you in the final budget context where we try and close that gap. There was a discretionary project fund, the operating side, not the capital, that hasn't been funded as yet. And these items compound through the long-term financial plan. I shouldn't hope too much on this, but I believe there will still be some additional revenues through the final property valuation, because there seems to be some weirdities in terms of the Roseworthy valuation in particular. I think they've got some work to do there. But the message I'm trying to say there is that I think we're probably looking at that sort of target anyway. That would be difficult to achieve, let alone putting another 500,000 on top of it. The Deputy Mayor referred to a 2% reduction in revenue. Well, effectively, that's a 2% reduction in rates, which would be an increase to the 1% was referred to at the last meeting. And that would be an even tougher thing to bridge that gap. I don't expect to see all this detail, but I'll just run through the highlights. I suppose the green bit, the green highlights. The request was referring to what seemed to be an extraordinarily high software license fees and support part of the budget. I suppose we generally say that's what modern organisations look like. Why I highlighted the green on the right hand side, the first 5 bits are those components that represent the new, what we generally call the best of breed approach to computing, which was the enterprise project replacement of the one integrated system, which was the Civica Authority system. So that happened a couple of years ago. I say best of breed, not necessarily so. Probably the best we could afford, probably a better catch cry. They come as unintegrated. So there's some chunky things that happen between those systems now because it's not totally integrated. And that's the reason for some of the monies we put aside, or try to put aside for doing some more consultancy work to improve those integrations. That's not to say it wasn't a path that you shouldn't have gone down. You've gone from a system that used to run on an Infomix database. I don't know if anyone's heard me speak about Infomix before. Infomix was the first data collaboration database invented by IBM about 40 years ago. It's not SQL. It's not particularly useful for anything other than taking money from local councils, I think. But they stuck with the thing that they earned a lot of money from. And I say a lot of money because we last paid them $236,000 in 21-22 for all of the licensing for that integrated system. And they used to CPI index their fees every year. So this year we've been paying $278,000, and we stuck with them. So our total license fees for those green is about $208,000. So we're considering financially we're well ahead, and this is the way that people get passionate about what they do. What have you, other than being modern systems in the cloud, what have you achieved is the main thing to keep in mind is you reduce your total reliance risk on one supplier. And those of us who've been around local government a long time know that sometimes those suppliers go away. And it's happened in the past where they write to you and say, oh, we're not going to do that anymore. You've got 12 months to find another system. So you reduce that total reliance. You've also reduced your holdings to them and the ability for them to charge extraordinarily high fees. So hopefully I shouldn't use the word, hopefully we will see the benefits of that progressively over time. But the main message there is that they're all things we have to have. They're all things we're contractually committed to. We must need and run our financials, our property rating system, our it's not particularly expensive, I suppose, in the scheme of things. The payroll stuff we're going to pay us. Like that, we could go back to the manual system. There's more detail about the support aspects of the budget. And as I said, there's some money put aside to try and improve some of the integration between the services, particularly between payroll and the finance system, and between the rating and property systems and the BSV mapping system, which was integrated into the previous system, but comes as a separate module, which I think would probably just about close the gap on making that happen with a little bit more money. Just a bit more information on software support. The hardware refresh. The bits I want to emphasise there is our contract, which is a 4-year lease agreement, expires in October 2024. So all machines are 4 years old. They are ageing. They are starting to get beyond their capability. I think mine's about to die. Its battery lasts about 2 hours now, which is unhelpful for some situations. The reason why we're suggesting a capital purchase outright rather than the lease agreement last time is that we're effectively funding that through, I suppose, the cash advance, the venture interest, rather than the implied interest in the lease. So we'll be saving money. Yes, it's all up front, but I think we'll probably have better control if we're doing a purchase situation. All happens in one significant purchase, so we're going to have some buying power. So hopefully we can probably do better than what we're estimating. But we do get very good prices for our buying our equipment. The current software, and you probably all know, it's gone through different systems over time. Every year the process is faster, there's more memory. That's where the key costs are. It's our software systems that keep evolving and keep putting more pressure on that processor speed. What does that mean for staff? So when they click on that button that says open Excel, it takes 27 seconds now than last time it took 15 seconds. So it's all extra time, and some things don't necessarily run particularly well in the old systems. We have a number of these things that are overheating, and the support guy says to me, "Oh, you need to shift your laptop to a cooler part of your desk." Oh, you know, I think it's fine that those things actually went as a boat anchor to the boat, not necessarily to a cooler part of the desk. Batteries are reaching their useful life because it's degrading from one grade charge too many times, and lost productivity from staff, having to close off apps and troubleshoot. And that's a list of all these high resource applications that struggle to run at appropriate speeds in their aging equipment. So that's the bid for the refresh. There's a whole lot of stuff on the economic development program. Did you want to talk about any of that at the moment, Corin?
We do. Thanks, Nigel. Look, there's a lot of detail on that slide, but essentially that is outlining all of economic development department's non-employee expenses. So back in February, I think I outlined that about 80% of the ED budget is in employees. So we do our work through our employee base. And to make changes to that, there's certainly a change management process that we need to follow, and that involves some moderate timeframes. But just looking at these particular costs, I won't talk about consultants because they're covered on a future slide. That's more broadly across council, likewise in legals. We come down to contributions. That's probably our next biggest spend, which is about 10,000 in the public art grant program, and also a contribution to the RDA, which is a 3-year funding agreement that expires at the end of next financial year. So council's certainly locked into that at the moment. Moving down to subscriptions and membership fees. So they're to retain our accreditation across our employee base. We also have good learnings through those memberships to best serve our community in the right ways. What's current best practice? And there's also some data subscriptions there for products that help us apply for grant funding applications that provides that evidence base to improve our applications. But also answer any questions that the community have or deliver reports for council. So we think they're an important purchase. And then there's a bunch of other expenses, contractual services, others, so that council-led public art program. There's some contributions under tourism to the regional tourism organisation, so that's Cross Australia, and you've heard from them via deputations before, and also some regional tours with them. Moving on to advertising, there's a modest amount in there for printing and publicising our region through brochures and various magazines and online. And then we move down into donations. So that's the events grants program that's moved over into the tourism space, previously from community development. And then we start moving into a bunch of smaller costs that I won't go into because they're quite small. Thanks, Nigel.
Thanks, Collins, and the members can study that at their leisure. Deputy Mayor requested a number of things. Some related to consulting. This is I suppose a general comment rather than getting into too much detail. We believe it's all necessary. We don't believe at this stage that there's any ability for us to trim some of these things. Similarly for legal, I have highlighted a couple of them, mainly because they're the more chunky ones, but the reason I highlighted the legal ones is that they are general provisions. So you've got $140,000 of general provisions in there for legal, and they will come to fruition. Now, areas like development and compliance, legal challenges against development applications and the like, we don't know exactly what we're going to spend on legal in the next 12 months, and it will be nothing. But we know based on past experience that it'll be that sort of number on average over time. And similarly with the compliance area with Brandon, in Verity, as you know, there's matters come up that end up being significantly impossible. And sometimes we recover the money, most often we don't. So we would like to play with those particular numbers at this stage. So again, maybe you can look at that at your leisure in detail. There's some odd ones about work health and safety contractors, all legal requirements. One of the things that we constantly feel the pressure on is the ever increasing demands that these things make on us. A lot of it's about what we need to do that people think to keep our staff safe. The latest mandatory requirement is the last one, It's this plant risk assessment project. That's probably going to be of the region of 30,000 or thereabouts. It's split it over 2 years. I said to the staff, on as much as that we possibly can in this financial year rather than to deal with the next financial year. So that's looking at all of our equipment and doing a risk assessment. We've been fortunate enough to get somebody at a relatively cheap rate. He's very experienced at doing this stuff, so hopefully that can be done as soon as possible. And
I have any questions at the end of the presentation.
These numbers will be common, nobody.
Questions at the end of the presentation, Councillor Simon.
Nobody will remember these numbers, but
we can go back to them. Yeah. Just a reminder that the something to consider is the Audit Risk Committee did support the draft budget being referred to you for advancement to public consultation phase. I must admit I was somewhat nervous about the status of that because we still didn't know what was happening with enterprise agreements at that stage. But to meet the strict timeframes that we're working to, we really had to move forward. And fortunately, we had the support. If we were to substantially reduce the revenue without finding cost savings, and I don't believe we can find the cost savings, it would be very difficult for us to go back to them and get that support again, because it just wouldn't be sustainable. And this is the recommendation that went to the previous council meeting. It was not moved and seconded. And I think I'm going to probably stop now, am I correct? And you're going to take over?
Yes, we can probably do that one.
Thank you, Nigel.
Just to note that Councillor Michael requested consideration of various reports on that. So I suppose instead of looking at specific reductions in the current budget, we're looking for a report during the you mentioned during the consultation period. There's some significant items in there to achieve that sort of time frame, but we obviously need for council to give us a direction in that regard before doing that.
Thanks, Nigel. So, look, I just thought it'll be a Nigel's presentation. I'll come away just with some key messages from my perspective. Number one is the requirement to adopt the annual business plan, budget and long-term financial plan prior to the 1st of July 2024. So there is some time pressure involved here. We've been on this journey since February. So it's been a lengthy journey to date. We do need to go out on public consultation before the budget's adopted. So the decision is required imminently. Looking at the feedback that the administration received since last Tuesday, there was sort of two key issues that were emerging that we've heard. So one is around the level of rating increase, and then the amount of expenses and the opportunities to reduce those. So firstly, just around the rating increase, and what I've sort of seen in this presentation today is that low levels of rating increase of around 3.5% are unsustainable. So from an administrative perspective, we just cannot recommend that. That would be tested with the Audit and Risk Committee to see if they would support that. But the messaging I'm hearing from Nigel is that the recommendation that the council put itself in an unsustainable position will probably not be supported by the Audit and Risk Committee. And of course, if there is that option to defer and just see what happens, usually that ends up with future rate shock to make up for any incremental change or increase that is being proposed as per the draft plan. And I think some of the more elected members that have been on council for many years might recall a significant rate increase, probably over 10 years ago now, that was caused by, probably no incremental increases or not big enough incremental, increases in rates in the years leading up to that point. So that was certainly a bit of a shock for the community. So we're trying to avoid that. In response to the expense side of the inquiries, so numerous minor reductions in expenses have been explored. However, we would, in introducing any further cuts, there are some unintended consequences and risks that are embedded within making those cuts. They are typically known at the detail level with the general management team. So I guess the question I would have for the council is, as a group, how would you seeking consensus on what those cuts should be across all the information that's been provided on those previous slides? So how would you achieve consensus? I guess the next question around that is, does it have a material impact on the financial indicators? Does it shift you from an unsustainable 3.5% rate rise increase to becoming a sustainable council? And is that an efficient decision-making process for us all to go through? That's the question. And then after all of that, is it clear and transparent to the community? So that's just some questions around going through numerous minor reductions on the expense side. Me personally, I think this council will be better off looking at more significant changes in service levels, and they can be evaluated over the next 12 months, so through the next financial year. And so that has led, next slide, to this updated recommendation. So what we're essentially recommending is that the council still receive the draft annual budget, business plan and long-term financial plan that was submitted to the council in its report last Tuesday, including those two attachments, the annual business plan and the long-term financial plan, and go out on public consultation for those. That draft plan has been supported by the council's audit and risk committee. I'm adding a further point there, which is to instruct the CEO to prepare a report to council, analysing the results of the 2024 community satisfaction survey. So that's that survey that's out there at the moment. That's where you're surveying the community. What are your most important service levels and how do you think the council is performing at providing those services? So there'll be some really interesting results coming out of that. And in my view, it would be premature to make significant changes to services without having regard to that satisfaction survey. So, and also understanding what processes the council can go through to change services. So there's service level reviews that can be done. They are typically at a point in time. They ask, well, what's working? What can be improved? And is there benefit in making changes? They can be expensive. They might not result in material change or deviation from the status quo. We can certainly prepare a report that shows you what that looks like.
I'll move that.
Thank you, Councillor Cotton. Move that particular recommendation.
With Gloria.
Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Cotton?
No.
Would someone like to second this recommendation? Councillor Dean, would you like to speak to it?
No, other than just to say that we've received a very comprehensive presentation tonight, and I believe what we do need to be sustainable, and if we don't make changes, we need to do them in a sensible and thorough manner, which will take time. We can't get into all of this.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Any questions or comments, councillors? Councillor Bill?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one very perhaps and comment. Last year we had the 10%, over 10% you could make an application. I know not many people made an application, and we have discussed it in the previous meeting. But it is a means of calming ratepayers' angst about ratepayers, and there are probably some properties that are going to have 30 to 40% increase in valuation, and they will be quite angsty. Is it, I'd perhaps consider it maybe a worthwhile thing to add back into our rate notices because there are going to be some serious medical effect. And then it's up to them to make that application. I know we have discussed before and there are some detriments to it, but it does somewhat stem the opposition to increased rates.
Thank you, Councillor Bill. I think you're very well put. And probably under the circumstances we're going to see ourselves in this year with the high valuations, it's very relevant. Would anyone else like to comment on that? Would you like to perhaps, I don't know.
Can I just ask,
Certainly.
question? So, this is Nigel. So there was land that Rosalie sold, which was, 2,000, well, 2.8 million to 20 hectares. It's still prime production land, but it's in a commercial area and will be commercial in the near future. So the people across the road, they're going to pay extreme amount of rates, even though they can't subdivide their land into a commercial area. Now, is that how that works?
Thanks, Nigel.
As I understand it, I'm not an expert in the valuation of land act. As I understand it, the rate payer, the joining rate payer will get a notional primary production value. It will take account of their situation regarding those subdivision constraints. I suppose the other aspect of what we're talking here is how much is the demand for subdivision of primary production land influencing the valuations? Probably a question we'd have to put to the value of general and understand a little bit more detail about those increases. But what I said before, in terms of there's some bit of valuation increase, it didn't suggest they were taking consideration of all. It seemed to be other forces that were driving up increases, not just demand for alternative use of land. That's not the actual valuation.
Thank you, Nigel. Just perhaps going back to that previous question that Councillor Bill put. How do we deal with this, councillors? Do you feel that there's an appetite in the chamber to revisit that 10%? We offered the last budget preparation for when we were dealing with higher land values.
No question. So, a couple of comments. But we can certainly take them on board with the final report regarding the adoption of the budget. Bear in mind though that there's financial implications. What happened the last year was better than the previous year in terms of applications, but what happened last year, approximately a third of those eligible, we think it's an estimate. Applied. We did allow 300,000 for those applications with the sort of volatility and valuation increases this year. We probably want to allow a little bit more than what was actually spent, but maybe it's 100,000 or so change we could notionally put in. But I would need to bring some modelling back to you as part of that final process, understand where that is, because it's quite possible that some of those huge increases actually isolated into particular areas, so maybe it's not a huge impulse to agree to that handling effect. But
Thank you. Well, we'll have that opportunity anyway, because this is what we're voting for in this particular instance is first to go to public consultation, which will of course give us further opportunity to discuss it in more detail. Councillor Dean.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. In relation to that matter, in my view, of the last two
Point of order.
rate
Point of order.
Point of order. Actually, then. So then,
You're spoken.
line of question. Don't argue.
is this a question?
my question is, can it be made clearer on the rate notice and that an application for a rebate can occur, what the conditions are, and make it easier to actually go straight there, because I think that's not been the case in the last 2 years, last 2 years.
Thanks, Councillor Dean. As I just mentioned earlier, though, we'll have an opportunity to discuss it at further length when it comes back from the public consultation stage. Pass over to Colin to see.
Just with regard to the motion, that's been put there, just had some advice, Carrie. Thanks, Carrie. That I guess because of the reports were presented to the previous council meeting, that we probably just need to adjust that motion to reflect that those reports were provided to the previous council meeting. That makes sense, because we've only had a presentation this evening. So there is some wording that we can do to adjust that to reflect that change. It doesn't change the intent, it's just that, I guess, a technicality. Yeah, if the change is happy, I can work with Kylie and Caitlin to have a look at that.
Councillor Colin?
What are you doing now?
Yeah, I think to vote on it would be good to have the that is technically correct.
And the second? Councillor Dean? Thank you. Yeah, okay, we can do that fairly quickly to be good, making all three.
What is the changes? What the changes are?
Yeah, not being the anti-Calvary.
Yes.
That's it.
So we want to receive the presentation.
Do you want to leave it?
One insert a new one, bump all those down.
Okay. Let's do it again. Yes?
So.
Let's say 6:30.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yeah.
On that day. Yeah. Yes.
We'll go to speak.
Delete those and see
Delete these.
Simon's going to mention the gravel, gavel.
Do you want to set a spoken already? Thanks.
Bring your own hand.
How are we going to this vote?
Meeting of council.
Yeah.
Held here at 2024.
And then you want that one out?
So that's,
Yeah. They're the ones that are used. Correct. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Councillors, I think we've got the recommendation amended with respect to dates. Short. In the meantime, I did forget to introduce Corinne tonight, also our acting CEO. Richard's holidaying in England at the moment, enjoying himself in positive break. And Corinne will be our acting CEO in the interim. And it's not a position that has to go before, so in that there will be no one pleasant surprises.
so I can talk the chamber through this, so
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
I guess the first point was to receive the presentation that was delivered this evening. Titled Annual Business Plan and Budget and Long-Term Financial Plan. The next one is to receive and acknowledge the report titled Draft 2024-25 Annual Budget and Business Plan and 2024 to 2035 Long-Term Financial Plan as presented to the ordinary meeting of council on the 23rd of April 2024. Next, point 3 is to receive and approve the draft 2024-25 budget and business plan and 2024-2035 long-term financial plan as presented to the ordinary meeting of council held 23rd of April 2024 for public consultation, subject to minor formatting and grammatical amendments. The final point there is no change, so that's to instruct the CEO to prepare a report for council analysing the results of the 2024 Community Satisfaction Survey once received and processes to inform service level reviews for council consideration. So just to summarise, the change there was to receive the presentation delivered this evening, but reference the reports that went to the ordinary council meeting because those reports didn't comprise this evening's agenda.
Thank you, Corinne. Well, I have a mover and a seconder. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Fabio?
Point 3, I'd like to see the wording amended ever so slightly on that to say receives and approves that the draft budget be sent to community for consultation. Hence implying that we're approving that it goes to consultation, not necessarily approving the draft as such.
You would like to say it receives and approves that?
That,
Councillor, any questions in relation to that minor amendment?
that's draft.
You included the word that.
Is
No
that,
problem with that, councillors?
is that correct, councillor Fabio?
Thank you.
That's second, Rob, that'd be that.
Thank you. Councillor Cobble?
Yep, that's good.
Anyone else like to speak on this particular recommendation? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Hang on,
Nick, I'm sorry to step on that, through the chair, I want to, very aggressive to voting on this. Just with that adjustment that's been made there, if you add that to the draft budget, and business plan, et cetera, presented to the ordinary meeting of the council, it then goes for public consultation, perhaps I would suggest that proceeds to public consultation. Just so that that flows through, does that make sense?
Yep.
So you want the word proceed, the context of the sentence is changed by adding that. That's all.
Yeah, right. This is the public consultation.
Yes, please.
Is that what we want?
And proceed.
And proceeds to public.
Is that correct? And it proceeds to?
And just proceed, so proceeds, I think. The actions in the first part, but that.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, sorry about that.
Quite a good debate, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Well, thank you, councillors. We've certainly gone through a lot of information tonight, and we'll have some handouts, of course, so there's still going to be our heads about what was actually presented to us. You had one question, Councillor Simon, that you wanted to ask early days.
I had a few questions about since this I do have it also that those concerning all the
But councillors, we're now in a very good position that we can get out there with deadlines out there. You would see what the outcomes of the survey that's out there now says. I don't know if anyone read the URPS survey. I went through that thoroughly as I could till I got fast asleep. It was very, very long. So the result of our strategic plan. Regrettably, only 34 involvements. I don't know what is involved in putting that together and how much it would have cost our council to do that. Things that we've got to do again. It would have been quite a considerable sum of money to get 34 responses. And I can just about give you the name and address of most of the people who responded.
Well, there's a few more than that.
Right,
I thought it was 37.
You can see why I'm taking leave. Well, councillors, I would with all that, there's no further questions or comments, so I thank you so much for your attendance here tonight and allowing the speakers to get on with the job and there was a bit of passion for that lecture tonight. And thank you in particular, Pepper, for highlighting something that I think would be close to most people's hearts in this room. We want to see our children getting the right opportunities and living a good life. We now it's been put in front of us, we'll do something about it. I'm sure we will. Well, thanks everybody, and I don't think we're stopping for any. No, nothing already.
Just before everyone leaves, there's a couple of A3 sheets, double-sided sheets there on the discretionary initiatives projects. You can still fill in the online survey. I know, Bill, it was closed when you tried yesterday or the day before, but that's been reopened. So you can either do it online or it's easy just to tick the time period that you think council should consider each of those projects, and also give us just circle or highlight your top 10 of each for capital and operating. That will be very much appreciated if we can receive that by the end of the week, because it will certainly inform us. Might not necessarily be for this budget, but certainly future years, and to get a feel for when the council might like to get some of those initiatives.
Byron, you okay if we fill it out, scan it, and send it to governance?
Yep.
Well, thank you everybody, and thank you for allowing me to take the time.
Declare the meeting closed.
Oh, I'm not declared the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Well picked up.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.